This is, needless to say, bad news for the Antichrist. It means that instead of a mere show of force ensuring peace in the Middle East, as he had hoped, he is now faced with a full-scale Middle East war, one that has the potential to spread like a wind-driven brush fire to the rest of the world. Specifically, the news that reaches him is that Gog's armies are on the move. They're headed toward Israel from Iran, Iraq, the Caucasus region, the Stans, and Turkey, the whole Muslim world east and north of Israel. A two-front war is every commander-in-chief's worst nightmare. World War II taught us how it works. America was forced to fight both Japan and Germany at the same time, and it took a total effort from a nation with vast natural resources to pull it off. Britain, who had no such resources, made a valiant effort to stave off the Japanese advance in Southeast Asia while fighting for her life against the German war machine in her own front yard. World War II was also Stalin's chance to prove himself, and he did. He proved himself an insecure and cowardly hypocrite, traits that are called pragmatic nowadays. America desperately needed Russia to engage Japan on the Asian mainland, which would have put Japan in a two-front war and probably shortened the conflict. But Stalin, remembering the spanking Imperial Russia had received at the hands of the Japanese in 1905, refused to declare war until after the Germans were defeated in April 1945, just in time to scoop up the spoils in the East. At the same time, he did everything he could to induce America to force Hitler to wage a two-front war on the European mainland. In other words, to compromise and weaken the German effort against Russia. Now, back in Daniel, the Antichrist is facing two fronts, or worse. As the war progresses, Egypt's push from the south is reinforced by Gog's African allies, and Syria's northern attack is suddenly buttressed by the full weight of Middle Eastern Islam. Saudi Arabia is making noisy diplomatic protestations, but she is at the same time quietly preparing for war herself. The Antichrist is between the devil and the deep blue sea, literally. If he turns tail and runs back to Europe, he will be the laughingstock of the world. His power base, not to mention his messianic aspirations, will crumble. But his only alternative is a seemingly suicidal stand with Israel, surrounded on three sides by the Muslim hordes, and on the fourth side, the Mediterranean is crawling with Egyptian gunboats and Syrian submarines. I almost feel sorry for him. As bad as it was, World War II was a rather leisurely and docile affair compared to what's coming. It took 20 years to set up and 7 to play out. World War III will be all over except the fallout, figuratively and literally, in, by my reckoning, about 2 years. As we shall see, several events will take place at the midpoint of the tribulation, 3.5 years into it, that imply that the war is over many months before this point. Brevity is not the only point of contrast. As a result of World War II, 55 million people died. While that's horrible beyond comprehension, it's child's play compared to the carnage that will be wrought in the coming conflict. Billions will die. This war is more than just powerful men behaving badly as in the past. This time, Yahweh has declared that the iniquity of man is full. It is time for judgment, for wrath. It is
the hour of trial which will come upon the whole world to test those who dwell on the earth. Revelation 3:10.
That is why the Holy Spirit is no longer restraining the evil in the world. See 2 Thessalonians 2:6-8. The final straw that triggers Yahweh's righteous anger is Gog's invasion of Israel.
And it will come to pass at the same time, when Gog comes against the land of Yisrael, says Yahweh, that my fury will show in my face. For in my jealousy and in the fire of my wrath I have spoken. Surely in that day there shall be a great earthquake in the land of Israel, so that the fish of the sea, the birds of the heavens, the beasts of the fields, all creeping things that creep upon the earth, and all men who are on the face of the earth, shall shake at my presence. The mountains shall be thrown down, the steep places shall fall, and every wall shall fall to the ground. Ezekiel 38:18 through 20.
Does this sound like a battle? No. Even though the Antichrist will be busy fighting his war against Gog, and will indeed have some successes,
many countries will be overthrown. He shall go out with great fury to destroy and annihilate many.
Yahweh will not be relying on him to destroy the enemy of his chosen people. In the end, God will do the job himself. There are 1.3 billion Muslims in the world today. If half of them live within the territories of the Magog Federation, and if a third of them are males of fighting age, it means that Gog could conceivably raise an army of 200 million soldiers. If you're familiar with Revelation 9, you'll recognize this number immediately. It's the exact size of an army from beyond the Euphrates that's prophesied to kill 1/3 of mankind with weapons of fire, smoke, and brimstone. Are Magog's armies and the Revelation 9 force one and the same? I don't think so. For starters, much of Gog's forces start out west of the Euphrates, and their objective is Israel, period. They're not interested in anything else. Well, it would be a nice bonus if they could eliminate that meddling infidel Eurotrash who caused all this trouble in the first place. Even if they killed every living thing within the borders of the Promised Land, the numbers of slain wouldn't remotely come close to the 1/3 of the Earth's population at this time, 2 billion people plus, who are predicted to be killed by the Eastern Horde. See Revelation 9:18 for that figure. Also, it's stated later, in Revelation chapter 16, that the Euphrates River will be dried up to allow this huge army from the east to attend a battle, probably Armageddon. But the armies of Magog who start out east of the Euphrates will invade Israel from the north. Why? Because that's where it's logistically feasible to ford the great river, nearer its source. In other words, the river will still have water in it when they attack. The Muslims aren't like the Americans. They won't be flying or sailing their entire army to the battlestone. They'll be marching to it or riding in armored troop transports, all 200 million of them. And even if it's only a tenth of that size, it'll still be the largest single army the world has ever seen up to that time. Whereas the Antichrist will, quite reasonably, see Gog's hordes as a formidable foe, Yahweh sees them as naval-lent.
The multitude of this would be Ariel's, i.e., Jerusalem's foes, shall be like fine dust, and the multitude of the terrible ones like chaff that passes away. Yes, it shall be in an instant, suddenly. You will be punished by Yahweh of hosts, with thunder and earthquake, and great noise, with storm and tempest, and the flame of devouring fire. The multitude of all nations who fight against Ariel, even all who fight against her and her fortress, and distress her, shall be as a dream of a night vision. It shall even be as when a hungry man dreams, and look, he eats but awakes, and his soul is still empty. Or as when a thirsty man dreams, and look, he drinks, but he awakes, and indeed he is faint, and his soul still craves. So the multitude of all nations shall be, who fight against Mount Zion. Pause and wonder. Blind yourselves and be blind. They are drunk, but not with wine. They stagger, but not with intoxicating drink. For Yahweh has poured out upon you the spirit of deep sleep, and has closed your eyes, namely, the prophets, and he has covered your heads, namely, the seers. Isaiah 29:5-10.
The armies of Gog will imagine that success is within their grasp. They can almost taste their victory. Their numbers are overwhelming, and their leader, the long-expected Imam Mahdi, has promised that the angels of Allah are fighting by their side. It will be like the glory days of Islam, when all the world trembled at the sound of your scimitars slicing the wind. Yeah, right, whatever. Yahweh is not impressed. He'll let the war play out, and then, in an instant, suddenly, he will bring it all to an end, his way. The Muslim prophecies predicting a great and decisive victory for the Mahdi will prove in the end to be nothing but the inebriated ravings of cataleptic blind men. Men, in fact, who have blinded themselves. All of Islam's pretensions, all of their delusions of glorious conquest are nothing but a dream.
I will call for a sword against Gog throughout all my mountains, says Yahweh. Every man's sword will be against his brother, and I will bring him to judgment with pestilence and bloodshed. I will rain down on him, on his troops, and on the many peoples who are with him, flooding rain, great hailstones, fire and brimstone. Thus I will magnify myself and sanctify myself, and I will be known in the eyes of many nations. Then they shall know that I am Yahweh. Ezekiel 38:21 through 23.
Some of the weapons Yahweh chooses to use against Gog's armies are listed here. We have already seen the great earthquake with its accompanying storms, which I take to be the final blow. Here we see the opening acts. 1. Purposeful infighting or large-scale accidental fratricide among the Magog coalition. Not surprising, considering the Muslims have always been more lethal to other Muslims than to outsiders. 2. Pestilence or disease, which, in light of the relatively short time frame of this war, is quite likely a man-made phenomenon, bioweapons they brought with them. 3. Heavy flooding, and 4. Huge hailstones, implying that this war will take place during the first half of the tribulation, since the second half will be characterized by a dearth of precipitation. And 5. Fire and brimstone, that is, Sodom and Gomorrah-style destruction raining down on them from the heavens. There are similarities between the Battle of Magog and a later conflict, the Battle of Armageddon, that might lead the casual reader to assume they're the same thing. They both feature enemies from many nations converging on Jerusalem, for example, and they are both characterized by great hailstones and a destructive earthquake, and great noises are mentioned, but neither pestilence nor fire and brimstone are listed among the weapons to be used at the Battle of Armageddon, and the flooding rain that helps destroy Gog's armies is not only not listed as an Armageddon weapon, it would be a highly unlikely one 4 or 5 years after the Battle of Magog, for the whole world will have been suffering from a devastating 3.5-year drought when this confrontation takes place. Is the last weapon mentioned, fire and brimstone, a metaphor for nuclear warfare? Listen to David's description of God's wrath.
Yahweh tests the righteous, but the wicked and the one who loves violence his soul hates. Upon the wicked he will rain down coals, fire and brimstone, and a burning wind shall be the portion of their cup. Psalm 11:5 and 6.
Though I'm reasonably certain David never saw a nuclear explosion, a burning wind describes it to a T. But David could well be describing two things, two modes of wrath. For reasons I'll explain later in this chapter, I'm convinced that the phenomenon described as fire and brimstone here in Ezekiel is not man-made nuclear holocaust, but rather an act of God, the same phenomenon that destroyed the cities of the plain in Genesis 19. There will be nuclear war, I'm afraid, just not within Israel's borders.